The sun dipped low over the hills of Lokoja, casting a soft golden glow over the dusty streets, where the hum of life slowed as evening approached. Inside a modest room on the outskirts of the town, Glory sat on his wooden bed frame, staring at the cracked walls. The room was sparse: a wooden table with a shaky leg, a single chair, and a stack of books neatly arranged in the corner. Despite its simplicity, this room had been his sanctuary, a place where dreams were nurtured and hope flourished, until now. 5 years earlier, Glory had graduated from university with a degree in economics. It was a day filled with celebration and promises of a bright future. His parents, who had sacrificed everything for his education, wore smiles that lit up their faces. His father had proudly declared, "Our Glory will change this family's story." His mother, eyes brimming with tears, had hugged him tightly, whispering, "You've made us proud, my son." Glory had believed in that promise too. As a student, he had excelled academically, earning accolades and gaining the respect of his lecturers. He was certain that his hard work would open doors to a well-paying job, enabling him to lift his family out of poverty. For a young man from a humble background, education was the key to a better life. His parents' sacrifices were etched into his memory. His mother, Mama Glory, woke up before dawn every day to prepare fresh vegetables for the market. Her hands were calloused from years of hard work, yet she never complained. His father, Baba Glory, had worked as a laborer on construction sites, often coming home with aching joints and a tired smile. Their unwavering belief in Glory's potential kept them going. But life after graduation was nothing like Glory had imagined. The job market was brutal, especially in Nigeria, where unemployment loomed like a dark cloud. 4 months he pored over job advertisements, sent out applications and attended interviews. Each rejection chipped away at his confidence, leaving him questioning his worth. When the opportunity to teach at a private primary school came along, Glory took it without hesitation. The school, a modest building with peeling paint and rusty gates, was far from ideal. His role was overwhelming, teaching 3 classes simultaneously with no proper resources or support. The children were restless, their energy uncontainable, and Glory often found himself battling exhaustion. The salary was a meager 10,000 naira monthly, barely enough to cover his transportation and meals. Even so, Glory poured himself into the job, determined to make a difference. He worked late into the night, preparing lesson notes by candlelight when power outages struck. He spent weekends marking assignments, often using his own money to buy materials for the children. For 2 years, Glory endured, holding on to the hope that things would improve. But as the months dragged on, the reality of his situation became clearer. His salary remained unchanged while the workload increased. The thought of continuing under such conditions filled him with dread. He began to feel trapped, like a bird in a cage, his wings clipped by circumstances beyond his control. One fateful evening, as Glory sat at his wooden table marking exercise books, he paused and stared out of the small window. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the room, but it brought no comfort. A single thought consumed him: how did I end up here? The question lingered in his mind, stirring memories of his dreams and ambitions. He thought about the younger version of himself, brimming with confidence and excitement for the future. That version of Glory seemed like a distant stranger now. Unable to suppress his emotions any longer, Glory leaned back in his chair and let out a heavy sigh. He buried his face in his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks. The weight of disappointment was unbearable. He had done everything right, studied hard, graduated with good grades and taken the first job he could find, yet life had dealt him a cruel hand. The decision to resign from the school did not come lightly. It took weeks of sleepless nights, long conversations with himself and fervent prayers. He knew that leaving meant stepping into the unknown, but staying felt like surrendering to a life of mediocrity. Finally, one morning, Glory submitted his resignation letter. His heart was heavy as he handed it to the school's proprietor, an elderly man with kind eyes but little means to improve the teacher's conditions. "Are you sure about this, Glory?" the man asked, his voice tinged with concern. "It's not easy out there." "I know, sir," Glory replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "But I can't stay. I need to find something better." The proprietor nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and sadness. "I wish you well, son. You deserve better." With his resignation finalized, Glory began preparing for the next chapter of his life. Leaving Lokoja, the town where he had spent his entire life, was a daunting prospect. He would miss the serene evenings, the familiar faces, and the comforting presence of his parents. But Lagos beckoned, a city of chaos and opportunity, where fortunes were made and lives transformed. On the morning of his departure, Glory packed his belongings into a tattered suitcase. His mother, unable to hold back her tears, hugged him tightly. "Take care of yourself, my son," she said, her voice trembling. "And don't forget to call often." "I will, Mama," Glory promised, his heart aching at the sight of her tears. His father placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Glory, we believe in you. No matter how tough it gets, don't give up." As the bus pulled out of Lokoja, Glory watched the town fade into the distance. His heart was a mix of fear and hope. He had no idea what awaited him in Lagos, but one thing was certain. He would fight with everything he had to make his dreams a reality. The road ahead was uncertain, but Glory was determined to reclaim his name, his identity. The boy who had once dreamed of greatness refused to let his story end in defeat. The bus rolled into Lagos at the break of dawn, the city already alive with the hum of activity. Vendors shouted their wares at sleepy-eyed passengers stepping off buses. Danfo buses honked impatiently as they jostled for space on the crowded streets, and the faint smell of exhaust fumes hung in the air. For Glory, the scene was overwhelming yet electrifying. He had never seen anything like it. Lokoja, with its serene hills and quiet streets, now felt like a distant memory. Lagos was chaos personified, a city where everyone seemed to be in a rush to get somewhere. Glory clutched his tattered suitcase tightly as he stepped off the bus. His eyes darted around, taking in the towering buildings, the sea of people, and the unending noise. He felt both excited and terrified. Waiting for him at the motor park was his distant cousin, Chikwudi, a man in his mid-30s with a broad smile and a quick wit. Chikwudi had been living in Lagos for over a decade and had generously offered Glory a place to stay while he found his footing. "Glory. Welcome to Lagos, the city that never sleeps," Chikwudi greeted him, pulling him into a warm hug. "Thank you, Cousin Chucks," Glory replied, his voice tinged with gratitude and exhaustion. Chikwudi helped him load his suitcase into the boot of an old, beat-up Toyota Corolla before they set off. The ride to Mushin, where Chikwudi lived, was an eye-opener for Glory. The streets were a blur of bustling markets, vendors weaving through traffic and commuters packed like sardines in Danfo buses. The sights, sounds, and smells of Lagos were a sensory overload, and Glory could barely keep up with Chikwudi's running commentary about life in the city. The apartment in Mushin was as cramped as Chikwudi had described over the phone. It was a two-room space shared with 3 other men, each of whom had a personality as loud and vibrant as the city itself. Glory was assigned a corner of the living room to set up his makeshift sleeping area, which consisted of a thin mattress and a curtain for privacy. "It's not much, but it's home," Chikwudi said apologetically. Glory forced a smile. "It's more than I could have asked for. Thank you." That night, as he lay on the mattress staring at the cracked ceiling, Glory felt the weight of his decision settle on him. The reality of Lagos was far harsher than the stories he had heard. But despite the discomfort and uncertainty, he was determined to make it work. The days that followed were a whirlwind of job hunting. Chikwudi had introduced Glory to a few contacts, but the competition in Lagos was fierce. Glory walked the streets, CV in hand, knocking on doors and submitting applications to any company that would take them. He wore his only pair of black shoes, their soles worn thin from days of trekking under the scorching sun. Each rejection was a blow to his spirit, but Glory refused to give up. He woke up every morning with a renewed sense of purpose, reminding himself why he had left Lokoja in the first place. His parents' sacrifices, his own dreams, and the promise he had made to himself kept him going. One evening, after another fruitless day, Glory returned to the apartment exhausted. Chikwudi was waiting for him, a bottle of cold malt in hand. "You look like you've been wrestling with Lagos itself," Chikwudi joked, handing him the drink. Glory managed a weak laugh. "It feels like it, but I'll keep trying. Something will come up." "Good. Lagos rewards persistence. Just don't let it break you," Chikwudi said, patting him on the shoulder. After weeks of searching, Glory finally secured a job as a storekeeper at a warehouse on the mainland. The pay, 50,000 naira a month, was a significant improvement from his teaching job in Lokoja. For the first time in a long while, Glory felt a glimmer of hope. The work was physically demanding. Glory spent long hours on his feet, managing inventory, supervising loading and unloading, and ensuring the warehouse ran smoothly. The heat was oppressive, and the heavy lifting often left him with sore muscles. Yet he didn't complain. He was earning more than he ever had before, and that alone was motivation enough. But Lagos had a way of swallowing even the most diligent earners. The city's high cost of living quickly devoured Glory's salary. Rent, transportation, and basic necessities left him with little to save or send home. He often found himself calculating expenses late into the night, trying to stretch every naira as far as it would go. It was during one of his grocery trips that Glory met Lizzie. She was everything Lagos wasn't: calm, radiant, and unhurried. Their paths crossed in the narrow aisle of a supermarket when their shopping carts collided. "Excuse me," Lizzie said, her tone polite yet assertive. Glory looked up, startled, and was immediately struck by her beauty. Her skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her eyes sparkled with a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm sorry," Glory stammered, stepping aside to let her pass. Lizzie smiled, a gesture that seemed to light up the entire store. No harm done. That brief encounter would have been the end of it, but fate had other plans. They ran into each other again a week later at the same supermarket, and this time, their conversation extended beyond polite apologies. "You must really like this place," Lizzie teased, her smile playful. "I could say the same about you," Glory replied, surprising himself with his wit. Their casual exchanges turned into longer conversations, and soon they were meeting outside the supermarket. Lizzie was a breath of fresh air in Glory's chaotic life. She listened to his struggles without judgment and encouraged him to keep pushing forward. As their relationship blossomed, Glory began to feel a sense of purpose again. Lizzie's confidence and unwavering belief in him reignited the fire he thought he had lost. For the first time in months he allowed himself to dream again. But Lagos, ever the stern teacher, wasn't done with him yet. One evening, as Glory sat in his corner of the apartment, flipping through his Bible for comfort, his phone buzzed with a call from his mother. Her voice, though warm, carried an undertone of worry. "Your father has not been feeling well," she began, her words measured. "The doctor says it's not life-threatening, but he needs medication every month and it's expensive." Glory's heart sank. "How much is it, Mama?" 50,000 naira a month, she replied hesitantly. Glory clenched his fist, his mind racing. His family couldn't afford such an expense, and his current salary barely covered his own needs. But he couldn't let his father suffer. "I'll take care of it," he promised, even as doubt crept into his heart. As the call ended, Glory sat in silence, grappling with the weight of yet another burden. Lagos had tested his resilience, and now it seemed determined to test his faith. But Glory was nothing if not determined. He bowed his head, whispered a prayer for strength, and resolved to face whatever came next with unwavering hope. The city might have been a battlefield, but Glory was ready to fight. Lizzie's laughter echoed softly through the park, mingling with the rustling leaves and the faint chirping of birds. Glory watched her, mesmerized by the ease with which she carried herself, her bright yellow sundress flowing gently in the breeze. It had been months since their shopping cart collision at the supermarket, and their bond had grown stronger with each passing day. For Glory, Lizzie was more than just a companion. She was a light in his otherwise dim existence. Her intelligence, warmth, and unwavering optimism breathed new life into him. She saw past the struggles and failures that seemed to define his life, focusing instead on his potential, his sincerity, and the quiet strength he didn't know he had. "Tell me," Lizzie asked, leaning forward with curiosity, "what's the one thing you want most in life?" Glory hesitated, looking down at his hands. He thought about his family back in Lokoja, the sacrifices his parents had made, and the promises he had whispered to himself on lonely nights. "I want to succeed," he said finally, his voice steady but soft. "Not just for me but for my parents. They gave up everything to give me a better future. I don't want their sacrifices to be in vain." Lizzie reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "And you will. I believe in you, Glory. You just have to keep pushing." Her words felt like a balm to his soul. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that things could get better. Their love story, however, was not without its challenges. Lizzie's world was a stark contrast to Glory's. She came from a wealthy family, her father a prominent businessman and her mother a well-respected socialite. Lizzie had grown up in comfort, attending the best schools and enjoying privileges Glory could only dream of. Despite their differences, Lizzie never made Glory feel less than her equal. She admired his work ethic, his humility, and the unwavering love he had for his family. But her parents didn't share her sentiments. The first time Lizzie introduced Glory to her parents was a disaster. They had invited him to their home, a sprawling mansion in Ikoyi, for dinner. Glory had spent hours preparing for the meeting, borrowing a suit from Chukwudi and rehearsing polite responses in front of the mirror. When he arrived, Lizzie greeted him warmly, her smile reassuring. But her parents' cold reception was impossible to ignore. Her father, a towering man with an air of authority, barely acknowledged Glory's greeting. Her mother, though more cordial, wore an expression that suggested she was enduring rather than enjoying his presence. As the evening progressed, the tension became palpable. Her father's disapproval was thinly veiled behind polite but pointed questions about Glory's background and career. "So, Glory," he said, swirling a glass of wine in his hand, "what exactly do you do for a living?" "I work as a storekeeper in a warehouse, sir," Glory replied, trying to sound confident. Her father raised an eyebrow. "A storekeeper?" "Yes, sir," Glory said, his palms beginning to sweat. "But I'm actively seeking better opportunities." Her father leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "Opportunities? Lagos is full of them. A man with ambition seizes them. Are you saying they've eluded you?" Lizzie interjected, her tone sharp. "Daddy, that's enough." Her father ignored her, his gaze fixed on Glory. "Marriage is not for dreamers, young man. It requires stability, responsibility, and most importantly, financial security. Do you have that?" Glory's throat tightened. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he was doing everything in his power to build a better life, but the words wouldn't come. Later that evening, as Glory walked Lizzie to the gate, he couldn't hide his unease. "I'm sorry about my father," Lizzie said, her voice filled with regret. "He can be difficult." Glory forced a smile. "It's okay. I understand." But he didn't. He couldn't understand how someone could reduce him to his job title, dismissing his character and potential. The tension between Lizzie and her parents only grew. They made it clear that they disapproved of her relationship with Glory, urging her to end it. Her father, in particular, was relentless, reminding her of the life he had worked hard to provide and the expectations he had for her future. "Lizzie," he said one evening, his tone firm, "this boy has nothing to offer you. He's not your equal and he never will be. You're throwing away everything we've built for you." Her mother chimed in, her voice softer but no less resolute. "Marriage is hard enough, my dear. Starting it with poverty will only make it harder." Lizzie fought back tears, torn between her love for Glory and the pressure from her family. She tried to defend him, pointing out his dedication and potential, but her parents were unyielding. "We're doing this for your own good," her father said. "End it now or we'll have no choice but to cut you off." Heartbroken, Lizzie met Glory at their favorite park to deliver the news. She couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye as she spoke. "I love you, Glory," she began, her voice trembling, "but my parents will never accept us. They've made it clear that if I continue seeing you, they'll disown me." Glory felt as though the ground had been pulled from beneath him. "Lizzie, we can make this work. I'll work harder. I'll prove to them that I'm worthy." Lizzie shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's not that simple. They won't change their minds and I can't go against their wishes. I'm sorry, Glory. I'm so sorry." She turned to leave, but Glory reached for her hand, his voice breaking. "Lizzie, please don't do this. You're all I have." Lizzie pulled away, her heart shattering with every step she took. "Goodbye, Glory," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As she disappeared into the distance, Glory sank to his knees, the weight of her absence pressing down on him. The woman who had been his beacon of hope was gone, leaving him to navigate the darkness alone. For weeks, Glory struggled to move on. Lizzie's absence was a void that nothing seemed to fill. He buried himself in work, hoping to distract himself from the pain, but it was always there, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. The loss of Lizzie was a blow he hadn't anticipated, but it became a turning point. He realized that if he wanted to prove her parents wrong, and perhaps someday win her back, he had to rise above his circumstances. With renewed determination, Glory threw himself into self-improvement. He began reading books on personal development, attending free seminars, and networking with anyone who could help him advance his career. Lagos had taken much from him, but it had also taught him resilience. And as the city continued to test him, Glory resolved to prove that he was more than the struggles he had endured. Lizzie's love had been a gift, but her departure became the fire that fueled his drive to succeed. The day Glory's phone rang with his mother's voice on the other end, he could sense the unease even before she spoke. Her tone was laced with worry, yet she tried to mask it with a forced calmness. "How are you, my son?" she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm fine, Mama," Glory replied. "How is Papa? And how are you doing?" There was a long pause before she answered, and in that silence, Glory's heart sank. "Your father has been unwell," she said softly. "It's nothing life-threatening, but he's been weak for months now. The doctor says he needs regular medication, but Her voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken words hanging in the air. Glory felt a wave of guilt crash over him. His parents, who had given everything for his education and future, were now struggling, and he was powerless to ease their burden. "How much is the medication, Mama?" "It's 50,000 naira every month," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Glory clenched his fist, frustration bubbling within him. 50,000 naira, a sum that seemed insurmountable given his current circumstances. "I'll find a way, Mama," he promised, his voice firm despite the turmoil in his heart. "I'll send money home as soon as I can." After ending the call, Glory sat in his small, cramped room, staring at the cracked ceiling. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. His father's health was deteriorating, and his mother, at 55, was working harder than ever to keep the family afloat. Determined to help, Glory reached out to his closest friend, Bayo. Bayo had been a pillar of support ever since Glory moved to Lagos. He worked at a multinational company and often lent Glory money when he was in dire need. When Glory explained the situation, Bayo didn't hesitate. "I'll send you 30,000 naira, he said. "It's not the full amount, but it should help for now." "Thank you, Bayo," Glory said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I'll pay you back as soon as I can." "Don't worry about it," Bayo replied. "Just take care of your father." With Bayo's contribution and a portion of his meager savings, Glory sent the money to his mother. He felt a momentary relief, but he knew this was only a temporary solution. His father's medication would require a consistent source of funds, and his current job as a storekeeper simply wasn't enough. Back in Lokoja, Glory's mother refused to sit idle. Determined to support her husband, she started trading palm oil. She would travel long distances to buy it cheaply in bulk, then return to Lokoja to sell it at a profit. The work was grueling. The long hours on the road, the heavy lifting, and the constant bargaining took a toll on her aging body. But she persevered, driven by the need to provide for her husband's treatment. When Glory called to check on her, she downplayed the hardships. "Mama, you didn't tell me you started trading palm oil," Glory said, concern evident in his voice. "I didn't want to worry you," she replied with a weak laugh. "God has been faithful. We're managing." Glory's heart ached. He knew the risks his mother faced traveling long distances on bad roads, often alone. He couldn't bear the thought of her enduring such hardship, yet he felt powerless to change the situation. When Christmas came, Glory decided to return to Lokoja to spend the holidays with his family. It had been over a year since he last saw them, and he longed for the comfort of home. The reunion was bittersweet. His father, once strong and full of life, now looked frail, his body weakened by illness. His mother, though still her spirited self, bore the signs of exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes, calloused hands, and a weariness that no amount of rest could erase. At the dinner table, Glory couldn't hold back his questions. "Mama, why didn't you tell me how hard things had gotten?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. His mother sighed, setting down her plate. "What would it have changed, my son? You're already doing all you can. I didn't want to add to your burden. But you're working too hard, Mama. It's not right." She smiled gently, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "A mother will do anything for her family. You'll understand one day when you have your own." Glory nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He admired his mother's strength, but it only deepened his resolve to change their circumstances. As the new year approached, Glory returned to Lagos with a renewed sense of determination. He couldn't bear to see his parents struggle any longer. He knew he needed to make a drastic change, but the path forward seemed unclear. His faith became his anchor during this time. Glory had always believed in the power of prayer, but now he leaned into it more than ever. He spent hours in prayer, asking God for guidance, for strength, and for a breakthrough. "Oh God," he prayed one night, tears streaming down his face, "I can't do this alone. Show me the way. Help me take care of my family." The days that followed were filled with introspection. Glory began to reevaluate his priorities, his choices, and his relationship with God. He realized that while he had been working tirelessly to survive, he had neglected his spiritual life. It was during one of these moments of reflection that Glory decided to make a bold move. He couldn't continue working a job that drained him physically and emotionally while offering little in return. He needed a position that would allow him to grow, both financially and spiritually. When he learned about a nearby private school looking for a teacher, he saw it as a sign. The pay was lower than his current job, but the workload was manageable, and it would give him the time he needed to focus on his faith and his family. Glory knew it was a risk, but he felt a sense of peace about the decision. He decided to seek advice from Bayo first. After all, Bayo had always been a source of financial and moral support. When he met Bayo at his office, he explained his plan. "I'm thinking of leaving my warehouse job to take up a teaching position," Glory said, trying to sound optimistic. Bayo frowned, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Are you serious, Glory? A teaching job? Do you know how little teachers earn in this country?" "I know the pay isn't much," Glory admitted, "but the school is close to my house, and I'll have more time to focus on my faith. I've been feeling disconnected from God lately." Bayo leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Look, I get that you want to serve God, but let's be realistic. How are you going to survive on 35,000 naira? And what about your family? They rely on you. If you take this job, you'll struggle even more than you are now." Glory hesitated. He had anticipated some resistance, but Bayo's reaction was harsher than he expected. "Listen to me, Glory," Bayo continued, his tone firm. "If you go ahead with this decision, don't come running to me when things get tough. I won't give you a kobo. You're making a mistake." The words stung, but Glory stood his ground. "I appreciate your concern, Bayo, but this is something I have to do. I feel like God is leading me in this direction." Bayo sighed, clearly frustrated. "Fine. Do what you want. But don't say I didn't warn you." As he prepared to make the transition, Glory couldn't shake the memory of his mother's tired smile and his father's weakened voice. They had given everything for him, and now it was his turn to do the same. With faith as his compass, Glory stepped into the unknown, determined to turn his family's story into one of triumph. The first week of January dawned with a mixture of hope and uncertainty for Glory. He stood outside the small private school that had recently advertised a teaching position, clutching his folder of credentials. His heart pounded as he surveyed the modest building, its walls painted in fading yellow, with a few children's drawings taped to the windows. This was not where he had envisioned himself 5 years after graduating with a degree in economics. Yet, something about the simplicity of the school and the promise of a manageable workload spoke to him. It felt like a door that God himself was opening. "Good morning," a cheerful woman greeted him as he stepped into the school's small reception area. Her warm smile put him at ease. "Good morning," Glory replied, handing over his folder. "I'm here for the teaching position." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Adebayo, the school's proprietress, quickly scanned through his credentials. "You're overqualified for this job," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Glory nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. I believe this role will give me the balance I need in my life right now." Mrs. Adebayo studied him for a moment before smiling again. "We're grateful for anyone who has a passion for teaching. Welcome aboard, Mr. Glory." The transition to his new role was smoother than Glory had anticipated. He was assigned to teach a class of 12 pupils, all of them eager to learn. The children's innocent laughter and boundless curiosity brought a sense of fulfillment that Glory hadn't felt in years. The workload was manageable, and the school's proximity to his apartment meant he could save on transportation costs. Most importantly, the new schedule gave him the time he craved to focus on his spiritual growth. Glory began attending a smaller branch of his church near his home. The congregation was small but vibrant, and the sense of community was immediate. During his first service, he noticed a dusty piano tucked away in a corner of the sanctuary. "Does anyone play this?" he asked one of the ushers after the service. The man shook his head. "We've been praying for an organist, but so far no one has come forward." Glory felt a spark of excitement. Music had always been a passion of his, and he had spent years honing his skills as an organist during his university days. He approached the pastor after the service, offering to serve as the church's organist. The pastor's face lit up with joy. "Brother Glory, this is truly a blessing. God has answered our prayers." Glory quickly became an integral part of the church community. His dedication to the music ministry earned him the admiration of the congregation, and his humility made him a favorite among the pastors. Glory's dedication to the church did not go unnoticed. The pastor, along with 5 assistant pastors, started a prayer chain specifically for Glory, meeting twice a week to intercede for his financial breakthrough. One evening, as Glory arrived at the church for piano practice, he paused outside the door, hearing the voices of the pastors in fervent prayer. "Father, we commit Brother Glory into your hands," one of them prayed. "Open doors for him. Let his service in your house not go unrewarded." Tears welled up in Glory's eyes as he realized the depth of their love and commitment. That night, he returned home and held his own vigil. His prayer was simple yet heartfelt. "Oh God, my Father, all the prayers I've prayed for myself and the ones people have prayed for me, Please answer them all. The following week, Glory noticed a change in his spirit. He felt a renewed sense of hope, as if God was assuring him that a breakthrough was on the horizon. One afternoon, while scrolling through job listings on his phone, a particular advert caught his attention. A renowned insurance company was hiring for several positions. The qualifications were steep, but Glory felt a nudge to apply. The application process was rigorous, involving 6 interview stages. Glory prepared diligently for each one, leaning on his faith to guide him through. At times he doubted his chances, but an unexpected ally came to his aid. The company's security guard, who had taken a liking to Glory during his visits, spoke highly of him to the management. "This young man is different," the guard told one of the HR officers. "He's respectful, hardworking, and determined. You won't regret hiring him." Glory had no idea about this act of kindness until much later, but it served as a reminder that God often works in mysterious ways. Finally, the day of the final interview arrived. Glory walked into the conference room with a mixture of nerves and determination. The panel of interviewers asked him a series of questions, probing into his skills, experiences, and character. As the interview concluded, the lead interviewer smiled at him. "You have an impressive story, Mr. Glory. We'll be in touch soon." To Glory's amazement, he was offered the position. The job came with a brand new car, a furnished 3-bedroom apartment, and a monthly salary of 2 million naira. Glory's life transformed dramatically. He bought a car each for his parents and built them a house. His father's medication was no longer a burden, and his mother no longer had to endure grueling trips for her palm oil business. His success story spread, inspiring many in Lokoja and Lagos. Despite his newfound wealth, Glory remained humble, dedicating his achievements to God. That year he reconnected with Lizzie, who congratulated him on his success. Though their love story had ended, their brief encounter reminded Glory of how far he had come. By the end of the year, Glory married a God-fearing woman from his church. Together they built a life filled with love, gratitude, and faith, proving that resilience, hard work, and divine intervention could overcome any obstacle.